Hi, everyone. Welcome to Fin Factor. I'm your host, Blaine Bertsch, co-founder and CEO at Dry Run Cash Flow Forecasting Software. And I'm really excited to have joining me today, Apoorv Dwivedi of Fixer.com. And Apoorv and I have been talking recently where he helps CPA firms, other finance pros grow their business. So it's a really interesting niche. And we got talking and you just had I thought some really insightful tactics and strategies that you use to do that. So wanted to have you on the show to talk about this. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me here, Blaine. Yeah.
So let's start right at the base. First of all, how did you sort of get into this area, and why did you sort of focus in on CPA firms?
Yeah. So just like you described, I specialize in marketing for small and mid-sized accounting firms across Canada and the US. Right. And so when I say small and mid-sized, they range from kind of single partner up to, maybe 20 partners or something along those lines, which is still a good size, but in that world, they're considered small and mid-sized. And normally typically what happens is, they've gotten to a certain size or point, and their marketing is a black box. So they're putting money into it, but they don't seem to be getting anything out of it. And that's what we do. We fix that. Right. So that's where the fixed marketing comes from. And how I got into that is I actually worked in that field. So I worked within accounting and consulting and finance firms for, let's just say, a very long period of time, multiple decades, and was running marketing and business development and comms and growth within those firms in a variety of different ways. And so what I saw was there's firms that are doing it well, and firms that weren't. And, there's things that I learned at the firms that were doing it well. I thought, okay, there's stuff here that I can take and I can build and share that and apply that with generally a whole bunch of the kind of smaller firms in the industry that don't have that expertise in-house.
So I think the interesting thing that you sort of pointed out, and I think a great place to start is, if you're a firm owner, how do you identify that you maybe aren't doing a great job on this? Because you said you could identify firms that maybe aren't doing a good job. I'm sure there's partners out there that are thinking, yeah, man, I think we could do a lot more here. What are some of the earmarks that it isn't maybe as effective as it should be?
So one of the things that we commonly see when people come to us is they've tried a whole bunch of different things. They tried something for a while, it didn't work. They tried something else, didn't work. Then they read a book or they read something and they tried that and it didn't work. Or they saw someone speak at a conference and they did something and that didn't work. So, a lot of the times you kind of see people that kind of jumped from tactic to tactic to tactic, and they're not really sure what they should be doing.
Yeah, that kind of seems like, I think I've even experienced that to some degree. And I think a lot of business owners have experienced that, because you hear these things, you see experts, a lot of times self-proclaimed experts, experts online, or ones that actually have built a really good following. And one of the earmarks I find of those things, that they always seem simple, and it never is. To get true results is never that simple. If it was that simple, everyone would be doing it right. And so I can completely feel that and see how a firm could be saying, we've tried everything, none of it's working. So what do you do that will give them that confidence that, okay, this is different, this is concrete, this is actually going to be effective?
Yeah. So the real challenge is that there's no one size fits all solution. And I think that's the problem that a lot of firms struggle with, right? So they've tried the things, it hasn't worked. Their growth is maybe flatlined, right? They got to a certain point, either through reputation or word of mouth, and maybe that's leveled off, or maybe they're not getting the types of clients that they want, and so what we do, in order to fix the marketing is we say, okay, what do you actually need for your firm? And what you may need might be different than what this person over here needs, right? So, the analogy I give sometimes is to say, you went into the doctor and the doctor didn't do any tests, didn't ask you what was wrong, and said, "Hey, we need to operate and remove your appendix." And you're there like, "Doctor, but I've got like a cut on my finger, right?" Like
Yeah.
there isn't a one size fits all solution, right? Maybe you need
Mhm.
it, maybe you don't. Who knows, right? And so the starting point is almost always some type of audit or review of where you're at today. So where do you want to get to versus where you're at? Then we can start to say, okay, what's the process going to look like to close that gap?
So, what are some of the points that you see really commonly see that are kind of those points of confusion, or it's like you don't know what you don't know. Like, where should they be looking? As just a really, I know you like walk them through a really involved audit, but what are some of the things that they might be able to pick out and go, yeah, that this is a problem that we have, and it's really common, right?
Yeah. So, some of the common problems that we see that we usually start from is um, firms lacking clarity around the types of customers that they want to attract and the types of services that they want to sell. And in a marketing world, and I'm sure you're very familiar with this, but the easiest place to be, the most effective place to be, is to sell one thing, whether that's one product or one service, to one audience. Now,
Mhm.
as soon as you start to deviate from that, as soon as you try to sell multiple products or services to one audience, that gets a lot more complicated. Try to sell one product or service to multiple audiences, that gets super complicated. Just try to do both, sell a whole bunch of services to a whole bunch of different folks, that gets infinitely complicated. And so that is usually kind of a starting point to say, okay, let's try to get you to focus, right?
Mhm.
And that focus then becomes the foundation for now let's make sure that you're getting the right messaging in front of the right folks, right? So, that's a pretty typical thing that we'll see is they just, we want to sell this and we want to sell that and we want to sell this other thing. And, we have these old clients over here that we like, but we also have these other clients. And I think there's an opportunity over here or an opportunity over there. So, usually someone
Right.
that's running a public practice, accounting, consulting, advisory firm, tax, bookkeeping, whatever, if they're the owner, if they're the partner, the person running the firm, they're entrepreneurs, right? They have this mindset of I see opportunities, I see business opportunities. And that's a real struggle. I struggle with it all the time, right? It's
Yep.
like, oh, I can really do this thing over here. But the more of that you do, the more everything gets watered down. And the reality in the marketing world is you're not just competing with, the accounting and advisory firm down the street. You're competing for attention with everything else that's trying to reach that audience, right? Maybe it's stuff that they're seeing on their phone. Maybe it's billboards out there. Maybe it's TV ads or radio or, you know, door knockers or whatever else that case may be. So, how do you get your specific message in front of those folks? You have to start by being very, very clear.
And we see that as like, well, and like I said, we've even struggled with it here at Dry Run. As we started to find those channels and find it's like you get closer and closer to the strike zone, and then we find things that work, and it's funny because we sit there and it's like, well, according to some of the experts, this is not supposed to be working, but it's working.
Yeah.
Nobody tip anything over. It's working.
Yeah.
Just keep going, right?
Maybe it's working, but you don't know why it's working, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah. There's always a little mystery in there, but it's like, yeah, we got something going here. Let's just keep it going. And before Dry Run, I had a creative agency for over a decade, and I can attest to the fact that like once we found kind of a niche and we really tended to focus on that niche, and where we started, we ended up moving up market. We the a large percentage of our clientele were government agencies, and we just, man, once we knew how to work with them, how to get to them, how to serve them, how to deliver, how to all of those things, and then naturally you're also getting referrals within governments. You're
Sure.
constantly
Yep.
getting referrals, and it was a very different world than when we first started, and it was a little bit like, if anything for a buck. kind of thing, because you just need
Exactly.
cash. And that's, yeah, I do see that with a lot of businesses, and we talk with CPAs all the time, and we do see that quite often, because we'll often ask that question. And it's like, well, we can help you with advisory. Who do you tend to work with? What type of businesses do you tend to work with? Because we can really help with these ones.
Yeah.
And like, oh, we just work with everybody. That as soon as they say that, it's like, oh man, this is gonna be
Yeah.
tough, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's a
Well,
tough,
and
road.
like you said, right? Like once you have that focus, it becomes easier to get referrals. It becomes easier to build your reputation, right? It becomes easier to build a message, or like we say in the marketing world, an offer that's going to resonate with that audience, right? Versus kind of just trying to be everything to everyone. Now,
Yeah.
having that focus though doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have like a niche or industries focus. Maybe that
Mhm.
is, right? The other thing could be like a geographic focus, right? So, maybe you're trying to reach small business owners within a 10-mile radius around where your business is physically located. Okay, great. Be known
Mhm.
for that, right? Be very
Yeah.
specific about that, right? We're the experts in small business accounting in XYZ County, wherever you're located, right? So
Yeah.
so it could be in combination, right? Like, but there's got to be that focus there somewhere.
So now once a firm is especially if you've walked them through this and they start to say, okay, we kind of know now this is what we're about. This is the real core service we want to offer, and this is who we want to offer that to. And like you said, they've tried a bunch of other things. It's great they have that focus now, but how do you get them, like, what's that next step to be able to say, okay, here's where we go next to test this out and to try and get something that's going to be effective?
Yeah. So it's usually a combination of a couple of things. One, working on building their reputation, for lack of a better description, right? I don't like to use terms like brand because I think that can be confusing for a lot of folks. But what I say is reputation, right? So how do we build up your authority? So particularly for accountants, advisors, folks in that space, they need to be seen as an authority. Now, they don't need to be seen as an authority for everything to everyone. They need to be seen as an authority on what they do for their audience, right? So,
Yeah.
how can we show evidence around that, right? So, what's the credibility that they have? What's the expertise that they're showing through, writing or speaking or other things that they're doing? So, we'll help them to kind of build out a plan that will establish their reputation and build their reputation. That's one part of it. That reputation creates a tailwind for referrals and lead generation. But for referrals, we'll help them to kind of identify, okay, who are strategic partners or other what we call centers of influence or COIs, other businesses that are also working with your target audience. These are folks that already have that audience and have that authority. Can we do something to identify those folks and tap into them? What does that look like? So that's kind of the referral side of thing. And then the third is under just a broad category of lead generation. And that is really going to depend, again, on who's the audience that you're trying to reach, right? So it could be, it could be a whole range of things, right? We've got some folks that we work with and we recommend, here's like a pure straight on digital strategy, right? It's a large target market that you're trying to reach. So maybe the thing to do is look at search, right? Organic
Mm.
search, paid ads, something like that. Maybe that audience, though, isn't searching for accounting solutions online. So you need to figure out other ways to get in front of them. Maybe that's through events and trade shows or conferences or something physically in person that gets you out in front of them. Maybe it's something else, right? Could be other forms of offers, right? So the third bucket around the lead generation. It really depends on who that audience is. Knowing who that is, then we can figure out, okay, where does that audience spend their time, right? And now we can then say, okay, we know that they're spending their time here, or here's the things that are important to them. So that's where we want to be.
The other thing that strikes me here, and of course, I've talked with other, sort of marketing experts that are, growth experts, I guess, in a way that have, it seems like a similar philosophy. When I see that they're very effective at doing what they do, it's not a quick fix. It's never a quick
No.
fix. It's a strategy and tactics that take time, but it builds something meaningful, and it builds an engine that can be repeatable. It's just, don't expect, hey, we're going to put in some money and by next Tuesday, your door is going to get kicked down with customers, right?
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Yeah. So particularly in the field of professional services, right? Now there are things like kind of compliance services. An example of that is, everyone needs to file a tax return, right?
Yeah.
So certain types of services are maybe easier to sell, or you can generate leads for quickly. But
Mm-hmm.
most of the clients that we're working with, they're looking for a certain type of client and more of a longer term relationship, maybe something that's kind of an ongoing relationship with that client, maybe monthly services or something else included. And that takes a lot longer to build up, right? That audience needs to know who you are, right? They need to be aware that you solve a problem that they have. They need to be aware that you have the credibility and the expertise, and they should trust you. They need to become familiar with you and actually like you, right? And be interested in wanting to do business with you. So yeah, all of those things take time. So
Yeah, and
there is no quick fix.
as always, business is built on relationships, and this is so much about
Yeah.
relationship building. Now, I can ask a question here, because if you're talking with the partners in a firm, and this all makes perfect sense, really good strategy, and they need to be seen as an expert, but you're talking about, okay, you're going to have to get up in front of a crowd and talk with them over here, and you maybe have to get on a video, and you may have to do this and do that. How do you identify who in a business, or who in a firm might be the one that is the best face for the firm, that is really comfortable with doing it? Because not everyone's comfortable standing in front of a crowd and talking, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, one of the things that we do, again, it's because they say it's not a one size fits all. Um, we really make a point of saying, like, okay, here's what we would recommend. However, in your case, maybe you're not comfortable speaking in front of crowds, right? So, okay, would you be comfortable on camera doing video instead? Maybe you're not comfortable with that either, right? Okay, if that's the case, then let's take that off the table, right? And look at what is going to be something that you're actually going to execute. Because that's
Yeah.
another thing too, right? A lot of it is like, it's like diet and workouts. Like everyone knows that what they need to do, actually executing it is a whole different story, right? So,
Yeah.
so what we wanted is we want to come up with that plan that they will actually internalize and be able to execute. Um, Now, if there's multiple partners or folks involved with the firm, and they are interested in going down that path of whether it's speaking or writing or teaching or something like that, we have ways kind of like assessing, okay, who one has the interest in doing it, but then two, who's actually going to be good at it as well. And the thing is too, right? Like um, these are accountants and advisors, right? The audience doesn't expect them to be, like, I don't know, like Oprah or Joe Rogan or something like that, right? Like they don't
So,
need to be like this, international media star, right? No one's expecting that from them. They're more interested in the expertise and the knowledge that authority can share with them, right? So
yeah.
that's a big thing for a lot of folks to get over. Um, one of the things I share with folks is I'm a huge introvert, right? Like I've done Myers-Briggs and those types of studies multiple times, and they always kind of come out the same way, very introverted and very analytical. But I speak to the things I have authority on, right? And usually when you
Mhm.
find that folks are kind of staying within their wheelhouse of expertise, they're very passionate about it, they have the knowledge, they can speak to it authoritatively to their audience.
Yeah. And so if you're working with a team, like you've got a number of partners, I imagine there's also maybe an opportunity to like divide and conquer a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
okay, you could be really good at this. You could really help over here. And here's maybe an area that you can take ownership of, or is that how you do it, or what? How do you recommend that?
Yeah, so generally within a lot of firms, depending on the size of the partnership group, and they could be at different stages with their own books of business. Um, but usually there's going to be someone that's going to be more kind of market facing, that's going to be more of a business development, um, boots on the street type of person. There could be someone that's more of that subject matter expert, right? That you want to put out there as the subject matter expert. So yeah, we try to find those kind of who fits in where type things. And again, like I said, no one's expecting them to be the slickest, the best at whatever, right? So it's um, for their audience, for the folks that they're trying to reach and get in front of, right? Um, where do we slot in, folks? And what are they actually going to execute? Okay, you need to be this person. If you're not comfortable being that person, okay, we're not going to try and force you to be something you're not, because we know that's going to fail.
Where do you sometimes see the biggest struggles on the execution side? Because like you said, like you can have a great plan, you can kind of figure all this out, but it's all really in the end, it's all in the execution, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, um, one of the biggest struggles, and I've seen this with some of the folks that we've worked with in the past, is they may put the time and effort into building that marketing strategy, but then 6 months later, their focus is on something totally different. Right now, they're dealing with
Mm.
some software implementation, or they're dealing with a hiring issue or something else, right? And so it's really important to kind of make sure that there is an ongoing cadence around marketing and business development and growth afterwards. And so, we usually work with folks on, okay, here's what you need to be launching at least on a monthly basis, right? Here's the types of things that you need to be quarterly. Here's what you need to semi-annually. You need to be doing this annually. You need to be doing that, right? Getting into that habit so don't fall off the wagon, so to speak, and or we find out, a year later that they had this fantastic plan, but they just never really got around to it.
Do you see them sort of at that point when some of them sort of drop off? Do you get re-engagement oftentimes, and it's like, hey, we got to get this up and running, or do you tend to find that they can once they have it, they can kind of keep it going?
Depends on the firm. So it really varies, right? Some folks will say, hey, we need maybe some guidance on this, right? So we'll kind of come in, maybe just kind of on a consultative or coaching type basis to work with them or the folks on their team to make sure that they're implementing the plan and they're kind of staying on course, so to speak. There's going to be other folks that, again, come back to us and say, you know what, we don't really have the capacity or expertise or the resources to do this. Can you just do it for us? And in some cases we can. In other cases we can't. But we'll say, this isn't our expertise, but you should go talk to these folks over here.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So how can like this is really interesting, and I can see that there's probably a lot of CPAs out there or accounting firm partners and that are sitting there thinking, yeah, we really need to take some steps here and try and figure some of this out. How do they get hold of you if they'd like to chat with you and learn a little bit about what and how you do this?
Yeah. So, if you're the person at an accounting or advisory firm that's responsible for the marketing, we've got a checklist on our website. We've got kind of a strategy assessment tool that will help you get started. So it's kind of a step-by-step self-reporting type thing, but it'll be a starting point so that you can start to make sense of your marketing so that it's less of that black box. And it'll show them some metrics and some guidelines that they can improve on and they can start to apply today. So in order to get started on that, just go to our website, fixer.com, fixyr.com, and you can get started right there.
That's terrific. Well, thanks so much for your time, Apoorv. This has been a really interesting conversation, and I love when I'm talking with experts like you, and you can tell when it's like, yeah, this is legit. Like this is really concrete excellent sort of strategy and an excellent approach. And I know there's so many firms out there, businesses of all stripes, that are struggling with exactly the sort of things that you mentioned. So, so I'd encourage you guys to go to fixer.com, take that little test there, and get a handle on where you're at in your business. And if you're looking for a way to forecast your cash flow, model scenarios, we help businesses that are generally stuck in spreadsheets doing something really complex, really complicated. If you've got multiple entities, multiple currencies, multiple people involved, you're the CFO that is spending hours a week trying to make this ready to talk with management. Come and see us at driving.com. We would love to help you out.